Do you interpret dreams?
I'm trying to pay attention to my dreams and see if I can understand if they have a meaning that I can kind of see what they mean. But I wouldn't say that I do interpret them at the present very well at all.
So do you remember the dream you've had recently, and I could interpret it for you?
Okay. Let's see. Let me look up one real quick for you. Let's see. What did I write down the 20th of April? Stuff about having to set up a system to get unstuck. Then, after getting unstuck, loading up the stuff to get unstuck. Well, that one didn't make much sense.
Well, let me just explain that. That's actually a very good one. Whatever you're loading up represents all the things that you have retained in your brain that you believe are your thought processes that are yours and yours alone, and they're not. They're going to be stuff you've acquired, like Mother says, fish on Friday, or Father says, soccer on Saturday afternoon. I'm just giving you simple stuff, okay? And so you've gotten a habit over your life of doing those two things, you see. And then all of a sudden you start to think, why am I going watching this game? I've got bored with it. Why am I going off to church? I don't believe it. And then you start to say, okay, dump the history. Well, dumping the history is not just dumping the idea that you're going to watch ball game or you're going to go to church. You've got to dump every time you ever did it. And that means every muscle, every nerve in your body is trained to sit in a certain position, like sit up well in the pew in church or lounge around and slouch about on the sofa for the game. Total opposites. And yet your brain knows how to manage that. And if you've got aches and pains in your spine, then what you're really trying to do is tell yourself, dump the history of I need to sit here or I need to stand there or I need to walk here or I need to, whatever it could be. It could even be bathroom duties. It could be you suddenly get this urge to, if you're a woman, to dress up and look beautiful when you know you're going nowhere. It's all about you dumping every one of the times you follow through with a belief system that has been either erroneous to your life's existence or you've outgrown it. And that's what that dream is about. And you're then saying you're trying to make new thoughts that are yours or bring up the thoughts that were yours and own them and use those. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I guess. Do you have experiences with fairies and mermaids?
I have never seen a mermaid in my life, but I definitely have seen many fairies. And when I very first saw my first fairies, I was looking at a sort of a butterfly and trying to chase it, and then all of a sudden it wasn't a butterfly anymore, it was a fairy. And so I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I was probably somewhere around that 4, 5, 6 year age. I remember sitting down in the long, tall grass that had turned brown, so it would have had to be in August, September time in England, looking at these butterflies all around me and then realizing that they were actually tiny little people with gorgeous wings. Another time I had a bunch, I was older because I was a teenager and I was reading up in what was the common land in London, where people could go and get away from the hustle and bustle of town life. And I used to go there a lot. And I was sitting under the trees and these just moseying there and reading in between. And I thought these were what we call gnats in England, little fly things that are pests and they're nuisance. And but as I'm looking at them, I'm starting to realize they're not. They're tiny, again, little fairies. And then a little later, I sat up and I found myself talking, I think probably some Gaelic language or something, because the wind was blowing my pages quite ferociously over so that I couldn't read my book. And out of the blue, I was just saying out loud this poem in some sort of Gaelic-y kind of, I didn't even know Gaelic in those days was a word, you know what I mean? And said it. And next thing I know, all the wind had stopped. And yet, about 6 to 8 feet from me, the wind was still blowing all the bushes around. But there wasn't a drop of wind on me. And I sat there just looking at it, astounded at whatever I'd said, because I didn't know what I'd said that had stopped the wind around me. And as I thought, how did I do that, I realized that I hadn't done it. I channeled the poem from the fairies, and I knew that, and though I wasn't looking at one. And then the last time I saw was gnomes. I had my mother's opera glasses and I was looking out the window. My sister was about 2.5, 3 years old, so that made me somewhere around 7. And I was scanning around the backyard, which was not a backyard. Originally it had been a tennis court, but it was all overgrown because of the war. And I suddenly caught movement, so watched them. And there was this little gnome sitting, just like in the books, underneath some leaves, smoking a long stem pipe. And I was really, really enjoying watching him. And then into the picture, as I'm watching him through the glasses, came a second one. And they were talking just like we talk. And I was so happy watching this. And then my sister came along and yanked on my arm to try and climb up to where I was to see. And I couldn't find them again. But it was not imagination. And then I saw, the last thing that I saw was dragonflies. When I was about 14, we used to go with the church to these outings, and there were all these dragonflies on the pond, and there were loads of them. And they were all congregating around the people. And people didn't like that, and they were afraid of them. They were running away, and I was just sitting there watching these things flying around. Then I realized they were male fairies. And so I just sat there watching them. And later, when we were on the coach going back, people were saying to me, "Weren't you afraid of those? That they're going to bite you and stuff?" I said, "No," but I never told anyone what I saw. Because in those days, they would have said I was, stupid or something. So I kept a lot to myself. But they do exist. I personally can say that. I've also seen at the end of a rainbow. That exists too. We were playing ball, and this rainbow came right down where we were playing. And the kids and I were all running backwards and forwards through it, and you could see the sparkles of water in it, and the water was on our arms, and you could hold your arms up and see multitudes of rainbows in each little tiny bit of water. It was so mystical and so wonderful. That was an amazing experience. Yeah.
Yeah, you've had some real wonderful experiences there. What would you say? What would you say the purpose of life is?
The purpose of life is to keep the oneness, which is all that is, in existence. No matter what planet we're on, we have to have diversities. we must have resonation and we must have reverberation. And to get that, we need stimulation in sound. So sound is the core of the oneness, which is friction. And that is created by dark mass, out of which compressed dark mass implodes, causing an implosion, which then causes an explosion. I don't know much about black holes other than I know that that is the birthing of the dark side before it explodes. When those holes explode, then we'll get the opposite. We'll get mass. And I see that as gaseous. I see the cosmos as gaseous in its sense to explain it. And every gas is different, so I can't define that. But as gases hit one another, they create some kind of reverberation, explosion, whatever you want to think of it as, and entwines and creates, cools, and becomes from gas to liquid and from liquid to solids that we know of, but not necessarily in a solid form that we would know of, say, in another planetary area. No parts of the universe are all the same. I've been out of body many times as spirit entity to other planets. And like once I was taken to Neptune, and I was standing on something spongy. I couldn't see. It was all misty. I didn't know what was going on. And all of a sudden I heard this little squeaky voice, saying, "You're standing on me." And I didn't know what I was standing on. And then next thing I know, I'm not there anymore. So, there's species of things that we can't even begin to imagine. And when we see something like Star Trek, I sit back a long way and go, well, if we can think of it, it must exist somewhere. Because you can't create something unless you've got imagination. And imagination taps into the oneness to say, what is in existence? We use it. So each one of us is capable of downloading something from the oneness and using it in this world to help us evolve.
Thanks. But you say that you have spirit, you call them spirit guides. Do they have names?
Oh, yes. Well, of course, some of them, like Archangel. All the archangels, actually, I've been talking to them since I was very young. But Archangel Haniel was the one that saved me 2 times from being killed during the war. The first one, as I said, dropped across the road when my mother birthed me and they were cutting the cord. And the second one dropped across the street from our apartment when I was 3. So I remember that one very well. And you can't forget those kinds of things. They're too shocking. But the bottom line is Haniel, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, all of them, Arakiel, Faniel, Zaphiel. I've been talking to them my whole life. I've talked to Siddhartha Buddha. Actually, I knew more about Siddhartha Buddha than I do Jesus. Jesus would just come and stare at me. I have strong memories of all of that. I know I was with him in physical body. I know a lot more now, not necessary to talk about it. Same with Siddhartha Buddha. So many I've had over time. Cornelius Tacitus, who is the historian, thanks to him, we know what Rome was like. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known that. He wrote about it. Master Chang, who taught me all the crystal acupuncture and the crystal work and how the earth is, and Socrates, who taught me about watching the ants and watching the plants and looking at symmetry and all these kinds of things when I was young. Plato was talking about the evolvement of energy and the power of energy and amplification with crystals. It just goes on. I've just had so many great teachers throughout my life from the oneness, as well as people's families like auntie and uncles and grannies and grandpas of people that have passed on, in different languages, in different countries. I've worked with wonderful interpreters who, have always helped me a great deal, because without their language interpreting, I wouldn't be able to help anyone, would I? So, it's very easy to channel in trance spirit guides, and I've done a lot of that in public work. And they'll come through, like if, say, Gandhi, he'll come through with his Indian accent, or Rama, who's also Vishnu. All these different people, will come through with their accents if they wanted, for people to believe it's true. And I'm asleep, as it were, just letting them use my body. And a lot of people are too afraid to do that, because they think that they can't tell the difference between a spirit guide and an earthbound. Earthbound spirits make you feel uncomfortable. They put suggestions in your mind, like an alcoholic who's passed on and doesn't know it will hang around a developing psychic and give them an urge to want to drink alcohol. And, of course, if they're in a situation where the marriage is on the rocks and all these things happen, it's very easy to justify that feeling and have the alcohol. And then the next thing you know, their negativity gets worse and worse and worse in the marriage, till they end up screaming and yelling and want a divorce. Whether or not the other partner is to blame and shame in their consciousness or not, it's another question, because sometimes the person who's insisting that they're possessed by an earthbound spirit, and they don't know it because they can't tell the difference. So I do a lot of clearing of people who've got earthbounds around them. I don't have to be with them. I come out of body and do that with the higher spirit guides. But I do have to help them reclaim their own consciousness afterwards and rebuild their minds and hearts to trust themselves again. There's a lot goes on that people don't realize from the oneness. And you might say, well, how come an earthbound would possess in the mind, a human being? Well, the bottom line is it's another form of unity. It's another form of the dark side saying, learn this lesson and move on, and teach others about this lesson and move on and towards the light. And then, of course, when you get the other side and you've got the very light, higher vibration spirit guides, they're saying, get down to the earth, get practical, get real, stop running around trying to live like you're holier than holy. Start realizing, you have to roll up your sleeves and get down there and scrub the floor just like everyone else. So you have to learn to harmonize, like Siddhartha taught me, the dark and the light, and use both. Yeah.
Yeah. I see that as tap lines of these beings you're saying that possess other people. I see that too all over the earth, that it's taking place. If I mention some of the guides that are in my life, I just wonder if you might recognize, I'll say like 10 or 12 of them, and if you know of any of them, like Pubi Quants or Yabal Sakabi.
Quants I know about. He didn't stay with me very long because his focus is more about the musical connotations of sound, the vocals, the vibrations. So he works a lot with people on throat chakras and what we say, what we do, justification, rationalization, excuses. So if you're working with him, that's what he'll be working with you on. Sound, resonation, reverberation.
Do you know of Yabal Sakabi?
No.
Do you know of?
But I don't work with that person.
Do you know of Rebazar Tars?
Tars I've heard of. don't know about the Rebisars. Is that part of the Federation thing?
Not that I know of. Rebazar is called the Universal Guide at the present, and he's been around for many, many, many years in the physical body. I understand he's still alive in
Can you spell that? Can you spell that for me? Because I'm not sure if I'm hearing it right.
Yeah, it's R-E-B, and now it's spelled I-S-Z-A-R, I guess. And then TARS is T-A-R-Z.
Okay, so you're talking Reverend, first of all, the R-E-V, right? No,
I
have never heard of anyone like that.
Of Rebazar TARS?
Yeah, no, I've never heard of anyone. But if I ask spirit guides right now, I hear, I'm sorry, but I have to say this because I have to give what I hear, an illusion of an idea that someone will stay indefinitely on the earth in human form. The reality is that a spirit guide can appear on the earth in a spirit form and manifest self. Okay, I'll give you an example. I was sitting on a park bench crying because my parents have been arguing about me again. And all of a sudden, someone sat next to me. She was dressed in a pinafore up-over kind of thing of the 40s. And this was now in this, 50s. Probably I was about 14, 15. She gave me a lot of advice. It was wonderful. And then she said to me, you need to go. Now, she'd probably been talking to me for a good 3/4 of an hour. She said, you need to go. Your parents are worried. And I literally got off the chair, walked 3 or 4 paces, turned around to thank her, and she wasn't there. Okay? There was nowhere she could have disappeared to. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Now, I've had several of those events. Even with my husband, we were driving and on a sandy road and we were getting lost, so we thought. And we saw this hut and we pulled over and there was 2 Mexican-type people there and Native American, I guess. And they gave us a Pepsi each and told us where to go to get off this road. Well, coming back, we thought we'd come the same way and take them a whole crate of, to replace because they didn't seem to have much. And they said this is where they lived. There was no hut on the way back. And, so, I want you to understand that I'm feeling more, whoever this person is that you mentioned, that it's a spirit that appears in form when necessary for a purpose, to help someone else.
Uh-huh. That woman that sat by you on the bench may have been a woman by the name of Kata Daki, who's also a real universal guide. Have you heard of her?
No, she didn't tell me her name, and I didn't ask. I've never seen her again since.